The microbiome, you can go just for that reason. There's different bacteria in these different environments, and we need these bacteria on our skin, in our nose, in our sinuses.
Because this is the matrix and it is designed to hook you up to it.
The 30-30-30 rules are real practical, and that goes to sunshine. You mentioned drink your coffee in the morning outside. There's been
I know that this was a lot, but it is all so important. And if you just need to take it bits at a time and kind of let it settle and then come back and listen to some more, there's so much amazing information. And as those light bulbs start coming on, you're going to want to get a lot of this in your life. Hi everyone, if you are new to my channel, my name is Kimberly McIntyre. I am a nutrition and wellness coach, and today we're going to be focusing a little bit on the wellness aspect. And if you are returning, I want to thank you for coming back. Today I have an interview with Dr. Ben Edwards. We have talked before and he is kind enough to come back. And Dr. Edwards, I want to thank you for being here. Today we're specifically talking about thought life and how thought life can have everything to do with your health. And I'm going to turn it over to you because as I have listened to some of the things that you have been talking about, it is so important. And hopefully this will just help some light bulbs to go on. Again, thanks for being here and opening the floor to you.
Well, thank you, Kimberly, for having me back on your show. It's an honor to be asked to come back because sometimes what we talk about is a little out there for a standard American, conventional, Western minded, which I totally was. And just real quick for new listeners, I'm an MD. Family practice was my specialty. Trained at UT Houston, graduated from there in 2002. And I wanted to just go be a small town country doctor. Just be a regular MD, a good old fashioned country doctor like my granddads were. But I was doing that in a little town out in West Texas for 7 years, just doing the thing, all I knew to do. And then I got introduced to more, that there is more to this thing. And it's pretty clear. I mean, especially now, this Make America Healthy Again and Bobby Kennedy Jr. and all that's going on in the political realm, but people are starting to hear more. We're super sick. I mean, if you didn't know that, just kind of look around. I talked to a guy yesterday. I was giving a presentation in Fort Worth, and he was telling me he just got back from Southeast Asia, and he purposely was trying to find an obese person over there on his 10-day trip, and he couldn't find one. And as soon as he flies back into the United States, he's purposely trying to find a normal sized person, and it was very hard to find one. And we have just completely over the last 120 years just deteriorated in our health. So once I was exposed to this, that there's more nutrition in particular, which I got 2 hours in 4 years of med school, didn't learn anything about nutrition. Most doctors get zero. So nutrition, exercise, hydration, these basic things we call the four pillars, but the last pillar is peace. That goes to the topic today, thoughts. And that's just a whole nother level. So I like to start with just pure science because the Western-minded Americans, standard Americans kind of, they'll listen to science. They'll listen to published randomized controlled trials and a doctor, talking about some published study that science proves. And I'm not mocking that. I'm just saying that's what we look to. But hopefully by the end of the show, you're going to maybe understand that that's a limited. Science can only prove so much with experiments with Newtonian physics. That's particles, what we can see, touch, taste, feel, hear with our five senses. I mean, it's good to measure these things and observe them, look at them, make predictions and hypotheses and theories and try to prove that out. And there's benefit in that, not denying that. But there's this other side, quantum physics, that's below the particles, that gets outside of just physical matter. And so let me explain this real quick. An atom, say in your body, say you're having a gallbladder issue. If you took a microscope to your gallbladder and you got down small enough, zoomed in, and you could see those gallbladder cells. Cells are made of cell membranes. Those are fats. Fat molecules make up the cell membrane. Then inside the cell, you have the nucleus with the DNA. Those are proteins that make up DNA. And you have the water inside the cell. That's H2O, obviously. Actually, it's H3O2. We'll talk about that more in a minute. And then there's other, ribosomes and endoplasmic reticulum and all these things made of proteins. But if you zoomed in on those proteins and fats, proteins are made of amino acids. We'll zoom in on that amino acid. What's that made of? Everything is made of elements from the periodic chart: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, an atom. If you remember back to maybe high school chemistry class, an atom has a nucleus, and then it has these particles that orbit the nucleus. In the nucleus, you have protons, those are positive charged particles. And then you have neutrons, those are neutral, no charge. And so those are packed in, and that's the nucleus. Protons and neutrons make the nucleus. Every atom on the periodic chart has this. And then these electrons are negatively charged particles that they orbit the nucleus. And those are negative particles, but there's a space between the nucleus and these electrons. And it's equivalent to putting a golf ball on the 50-yard line of your local NFL football team stadium, and then mosquitoes buzzing around at the very top of those light posts. That's the equivalent distance in an atom between the nucleus and these electrons. So it's 99% empty space. And everything in creation is made from these molecules, these atoms. So this brick wall behind me looks real solid, but if you zoomed in, got a powerful enough microscope, it would be 99% empty of physical particles that you can see, touch, taste, measure, physical, Newtonian. It's not void of anything. That empty space, empty of physical matter, has energetic frequencies at play, vibrational frequencies of energetic waves, consistent with the vibrational frequency of the spoken word. I mean, how does my word get from this microphone through the airwaves to you? Or if you're in a room right now, there's waves, radio waves, AM and FM radio waves. If you had an old school radio with a dial and you could tune in, and the receiver can receive those particular wavelengths and can translate that into music and voice and words you can understand on a radio station. So we like microwaves, but even in the medical realm, MRIs, EKGs, EEGs. I mean, so we're getting into what we call energy medicine, energetics, quantum physics, supernatural, outside the natural, this invisible realm. But there's this interplay between the invisible realm and the physical realm, and it's clear in the literature, very, very, very clear. Tons of experiments on this. One of the first experiments called the observer effect. And this is in quantum physics. You can look this up, the observer effect. But they were doing an experiment with electrons, those negative particles. There's an electron gun basically shooting electrons onto a board where they could record where that electron was hitting. And when the scientists doing the experiment observed the experiment, the electrons would act a certain way. And then when he didn't observe, he went out of the room, the electrons behaved differently and landed in different places. And he repeated this over and over. And it was clear, when I observe and I have intention, I have a thought, it impacts that. So that was one thing, observer effect. Then there's the Princeton Engineering Anomaly Research Lab, PEAR, PEAR. And you can look this up. You can just YouTube Princeton or PEAR Lab. There's this experiment where there's a random event generator. And I'm no computer guy. I'm not a quantum physics guy. But my layman's interpretation of this 9-minute YouTube video from PEAR Lab was this computer randomly generates sets of numbers, just completely random. Well, they did an experiment where they had human beings, and they gave them instruction to think about, have intention and thought, and think about certain numbers, and it actually impacted the random event generation. It wasn't random anymore. It was impacted by the thoughts of the experimental group. And they've done lots of other experiments like that. In the medical realm, and this was at my alma mater, UT Houston, in 2002, the year I graduated, an orthopedic surgeon decided to do an experiment to determine what part of his arthroscopic knee surgery was really benefiting the patient. So these patients come in with arthritis and their cartilage in their knees kind of frayed and messed up. And so an orthopedic will go in there arthroscopically. That means 2 tiny holes they punch in the knee. One hole's for a camera, one hole's for the tool. So he can see with the camera what's going on. Then with his tool, he can smooth that cartilage down, the debris that's in there. So he cleans up the cartilage, smooths it up. Then the second part of that surgery, he puts another instrument in and he washes out all the inflammatory fluid that's built up. just cleans it up, washes it out, irrigates it, gets it real clean, and puts saline or whatever back in. And so he wanted to know, is it the cartilage smoothing out part or the washing out part of all the inflammation that helps the most? So he set this experiment up where one group, he just smoothed the cartilage only, didn't do anything else. Then the second group, he just washed them out and he didn't do anything with the cartilage. And then the third group, he poked the holes, put the camera in, but he didn't do anything. He didn't do cartilage. He didn't wash it out. And what he found was after he followed these people over, I think it was 2 years, and he followed them up regularly, like quarterly. And he would do a pain scale, rate your pain, your mobility, range of motion, strength, daily activities, all this kind of stuff. And at the end of 2 years, he went back and compiled all the data, and he found that all three groups were exactly the same, including people in that last group that put their canes down, their crutches, and their walkers who were running and playing basketball again. There's something structurally happening. So this goes to the water that's inside our cell. And we're mostly water, 70% by weight, 90, 95, some say 99% water by molecule. If you lined up every molecule in the body and just started counting them, they would all be water except the 10th. Every 10th molecule would be something besides water. But the point is, we're mostly water. Gerald Pollack, he's a professor at the University of Washington, and he was doing an experiment. This was years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And he wrote a book about it called The Fourth Phase of Water, because what he thought at the time, and everybody thought at the time, was there was liquid, solid, and vapor. Liquid water, ice, and steam. Well, so he's doing an experiment on a cell, and he accidentally pokes a hole through the cell membrane with his pipette, and he pulled that pipette out, and the water didn't just squirt out like you would expect it, like a water balloon. H2O would just squirt out of there, and it didn't do that. And he thought that's odd, and he poked a few more holes, and the cell maintained its integrity. The water stayed inside the cell, and he was thinking, what in the world kind of water is this? What's going on here? And he called some colleagues around the world to see if they knew, has anyone studied the intracellular water? And basically nobody had, and he didn't have a good answer. So he went on to study this thing and found out there's this fourth phase of water, and that's what's inside our cells, or should be a healthy cell, H3O2. And it has a consistency to it that's different. More, you can think of like almost like a liquidy gelatin, like liquid crystal, sort of. Anyway, so there's this fourth phase of water, but this particular kind of water we've discovered over the years has many characteristics and qualities about it that are fascinating. And this is where people might lose some people. It can hold information. It can hold memories. It's basically a supercomputer memory processor, which would explain so many different case reports about organ transplant recipients. Just read one yesterday. 16-month-old little boy drowns in a swimming pool, the parents donate the heart to another little baby who had a congenital heart issue. These stories, they talk about characteristics of the donor being shown in the recipient. I mean, one lady was like a ballerina yoga instructor, real healthy and fit, and she gets a transplant, and now she wants to eat McDonald's French fries or something. So many stories about the characteristics and even some talents like violin playing. This person can also play the violin, who is an organ recipient. Turns out the donor was a master violinist, stuff like that. I mean, this doctor in France, Jacques Benveniste, he's a regular conventional MD doctor. He helped develop a blood test called the RAST test, R-A-S-T. If you have allergies, you may go to your doctor and they draw your blood to see if you're allergic to dog dander, or cats, or pollen, or cedar, or whatever. Well, that blood that they drew from you, they send it to the lab, and this particular test, they'll take, say, the dog dander protein, and they'll expose your blood to it. And if the cells in your blood, called mast cells, they hold histamine. If you're reacting to dog dander, then those histamine cells will just release. It's called degranulation. It'll just dump all the histamine into the blood all of a sudden if you're allergic to, reactive to dogs. Well, Jacques Benveniste, who helped develop this test, he had a person in his lab who was a homeopathic, and that person said, hey, Dr. Benveniste, can I run an experiment with the RAS test? I want to take the dog dander. Before we expose it to the patient's blood, I want to take this dog dander vial, and I want to take just a drop of it and put it in a vial of pure water. And then you shake that vial up, and then you take a drop of that and put it into another vial of pure water, shake it up, and take a drop of that, and you just keep doing that multiple times, 10 times, 20 times, 50, 30, 100 times. So these are dilutions. You get so diluted, there's no physical dog dander left in that water that anyone can measure. And they'll take a drop of that water, expose it to that patient's blood, and see mast cell degranulation. It still reacted as if there was dander there, and there wasn't. And so Dr. Benveniste's conclusion in this experiment was this water is holding an imprint, like electromagnetic fingerprint, so to speak, holding information from that dog dander. I mean, this is super controversial. He couldn't believe it hardly. So he repeated the experiment over and over and over, and it kept happening. He submits this to the journal Nature for publication. And of course, the Nature journal is very prestigious. And they basically say, whoa, what in the world? This is going to turn science on its head, basically. This is going to invalidate every experiment ever run, because the intention of the experimenter and the intention of the patient, the intention of the doctor, our spoken word, our thoughts all impact everything. Like, this is crazy. Well, Nature wouldn't publish it. They thought this has to be fraud or something crazy. And they arranged to go to his lab and observe this experiment. And they did, to show, no, this is real. There's no fraud. This is a legitimate experiment. So they ended up publishing the paper in Nature. Huge firestorm. Everyone, a lot of people calling Dr. Benveniste shyster, basically, making stuff up, crazy, lunatic. And Benveniste basically spends the rest of his life defending himself and his name in the experiments. And he died young, died early, I think, from the stress of that. Well, Dr. Luc Montagnier comes along, who's very well respected in the science community because he won the Nobel Prize for discovering HIV virus. Well, he came in and wanted to prove Jacques Benveniste either a fraud or true. And then he needs to get the Nobel Prize. So Luc Montagnier replicated this experiment with HIV DNA, diluted to no more DNA. And he's able to take that water and he was able to reconstitute HIV. So then people were like, whoa, Montagnier replicated this. So that everything I just talked about there is homeopathy that has to do with water holding information. So you start to piece all this together. Dr. Emoto in Japan years ago decided to do an experiment on water. He took water from a pristine mountain stream that was pure, no pollutants, took a sample of the water, got a drop, put it on a slide, froze it. So it was a frozen water droplet, looked at it under the microscope, took a picture of it. It was a beautiful water crystal, like a snowflake, beautiful, symmetrical, and just beautiful. Well, then he went to the most polluted river in China or Japan, I forget where, got a sample of that, put a drop on the plate, froze it, looked at it, and it was just a mangled, not symmetrical, just disfigured looking, ugly. And he thought, well, that's interesting. This toxicity of this water is showing is not, not pretty, basically. So he went on to run lots of experiments with clean and dirty water, but then he started exposing the water to various things. And eventually the various things were words, music, words, even written words. He would tape on a piece of masking tape on the water jar of water and take pictures, and just incredible. So he wrote a book. You can go or look on the internet, The Hidden Messages in Water, Dr. Emoto, Emoto. So you take Emoto's work, and then there's some German doctor, Bernard Kromplin with a K, Kromplin. He did very similar. He took water and exposed it to music and flowers and different things, emotions from people in his lab that worked in his lab, if they're having a sad day or bad day, or the unforgiveness, bitter, whatever. And he showed the same thing. There's this impact, and there's a change in the molecular shape and structure. So you take all these guys' work, Gerald Pollack's work, intracellular, and then you look at some of these studies, even at Harvard Mind Body Institute, and they show how the DNA, that double helix DNA, those proteins, actually tighten up like a spring, getting compressed with thoughts rooted in bitterness, unforgiveness, and anger. It changes the physical shape of the double helix, which means which genes are going to be expressed. Because your genes, they're just books on a bookshelf. They're closed. You could walk into a library and see 25,000 books, which is about the number of genes we have. But someone has to tell the librarian, go to the third shelf from the right and go to the second book from the right, go to chapter 34, paragraph 2, read that to me, and I'll do what that says. So that's called genetic expression. So our books, our genes are just there, but then we have to get them turned on and off and read them and do what it says. And we've known for a long time, this is called epigenetics. Things outside the genes or above the genes. Epi means outside or above the genes. Will click into that double helix and turn on genes or turn them off. So you can keep your BRCA gene for cancer turned off. Just because you have it doesn't mean you have to read it and do it. This is very clear in the literature. There's groups across the world that have these genes, genetic predisposition for Alzheimer's, heart attack, cancer, but they have none of those diseases. They showed this in an experiment with mice, agouti mice. They have a gene mutation that makes them be obese. And it's on purpose so we can study obesity, study diabetes in the lab. And so these mice are obese and their fur is yellow instead of brown. So everyone just knows the agouti mice, they'll be obese and they'll be yellow. Well, someone decided to feed the mama mouse the obese, yellow-coated agouti gene mama. Feed her extra B vitamins in her rat chow. Then they bred her and she had her babies, and the babies came out brown coated and normal, skinny, like not fat, not obese. Still had the agouti gene. It wasn't being expressed. Dean Ornish, UCLA, he did prostate cancer patients, took biopsies of the prostate cancer cells, looked at them, looked at the genes that were turned on, the oncogenes were turned on, cancer suppressor genes that we have were turned off. And he put them through 6 months of diet and stress management stuff, went back, did another biopsy. The cancer grow gene had flipped off, the cancer suppressor gene had turned on, and their cancer went away and their PSA blood test for prostate cancer went to normal. But these physical molecules, cells that make up our body, that when they get dysfunctional, they create symptoms. And we call that symptom a disease, and we do a pharmaceutical to manage it. If you have inflammation in your airway, it's swollen and has mucus in there. So that means your airway just got narrowed down and you can't get air through there. And when you do try to suck air through there, it causes a wheezing sound. And we call that asthma. That's just a word, asthma. It's describing a noise called a wheeze. And the wheeze is coming because this pipe, this windpipe, is swollen. You can't get as much air through there because of the swelling. So doctors in America are trained to manage that problem. They will give you an inhaler of one of two things or both. One is called a bronchodilator, and it relaxes the muscle that's around the windpipe. So if you get a relaxed muscle that's not tight and swollen and inflamed, the airway gets bigger and you can get air in there and you're not so tight and wheezing. And then they give you a steroid inhaler, and the steroid knocks down inflammation, turns off your immune system. That inflammation comes from your immune system turn on fighting something. And the steroid just tells your immune system, quit doing that, quit fighting. Steroids just shut that whole thing down. So there's less mucus, less inflammatory water swelling up the pipe. Well, so that's management. So you got to take this bronchodilator and steroid forever. And when you remove those medications, here comes the swelling again. So we stay in the physical realm only, and we treat a symptom only. And I'm not saying you have to go straight to your thoughts, although these days I do think that's probably the most important thing. But you can reduce inflammation by eating an anti-inflammatory diet, by getting sunshine, by moving around and exercising, by being in touch with the earth, get your feet on the grass. You know, there are things for sure in the physical realm that are going to help the physical cells do what they do better. But what I've found over the years, 12 years now of doing more holistic, is you can do perfect diet, perfect exercise, perfect hydration, and you can get all the way better. And we've seen people do that, but we've seen those people also regress back, even still doing good diet and exercise. Or we've seen them get somewhat better and they hit a ceiling and they just plateau, and some don't get any better at all. And they're eating great and supplementing great and doing all this stuff. And it's the thoughts. And this really got driven home to me one day. Dr. Lee Cowden, who is a president of the Academy of Comprehensive Integrative Medicine, and he came to see me at my clinic here in Lubbock, and he flew in for the day. I thought it was just for the morning. So I cleared my schedule. We met and talked. He taught me a lot. We just visited and had lunch. And then I said goodbye. I thought he was leaving, flying out. And he said, "Oh, no, I'm here all afternoon. I'm leaving tomorrow." And I thought, oh, great, because I had patients scheduled. And this guy's like Hall of Fame, president of the academy. And here's me, barely know what I'm doing. And so we had this lady, a 55-year-old lady with type 1 diabetes. And type 1 typically used to be called juvenile diabetes. You're kind of born with it. Your pancreas just doesn't make insulin. And these kiddos, when they're 4, 5, 6 years old, get diagnosed. That's traditionally because now the immune system, even in adults, this can happen. The immune system will attack the pancreas and damage the cells that make insulin. So you no longer make insulin. So all of a sudden your blood sugar is 800. So that's type 1, autoimmune. That's different than insulin resistance type 2. It's another story. Anyways, this lady's acting like a type 1, like her own immune system came in and killed her pancreas at 55 years old. So I went through the typical kind of questions about her diet and her lifestyle and everything. And she was a very, very classic standard American, tons of sugar, tons of Coca-Cola, tons of processed grains that turn right into sugar. I mean, her sugar intake was just through the roof, tons of antibiotics over the years for colds and UTIs and all this stuff. So basically, she was a setup. She had wiped out her good bacteria in her gut. The sugar feeds candida, type of yeast or fungus, lives off sugar. So she had completely shifted her microbiome, dominant candida, this yeast, hardly any good bacteria. So I felt like that candida moved up into her pancreas. The immune system saw that, went into the pancreas to try to clear that and kill that. Collateral damage, friendly fire, knocked out the cells that make insulin. That's what I was thinking. So I told her all this, said we're going to do some anti-candida diet, anti-candida herbs, maybe even pharmaceutical to kill this yeast. And then I asked Dr. Cowden what he thought about it. And he basically said, yeah, I agree with that. But I also think there's some parasite involvement. He had his reasons for thinking that. And he gave me some herbs to do for parasites also. But then he looked at that lady and he said, I just have one question for you. When was a sweetness robbed from your life? And she kind of looked at him like, what are you talking about? That's a little, what's that have to do with anything? What's that even mean? And I kind of looked at Dr. Cowden the same way. So I'm thinking, this lady's going to think we're weird. What kind of question is that? But he asked her again, the thing that brought you the most sweetness in your life, when was it taken from you? And then a few seconds later, she broke down crying and said that her granddaughter that she raised like her own daughter for 13 years, because mom had split, left town, left this baby with grandma, the patient. And after 13 years, mom comes back in the picture and takes this kid away and just rips the grandma's heart out. And she don't know where they are. The mom didn't communicate to her. Anyway, she's crying, telling this story. And Dr. Cowden looked at me and said, the parasite and candida herbs and diet should help. Her sugar should start coming down, but it's going to come back up. She's not going to be made whole, truly well. Don't need a doctor. That's our goal until she can get to that unresolved emotional conflict. And that's when he explained to me, basically, he said, you can kill alligators all day long, but if you don't drain the swamp, the alligators come back. These abnormal vibrational frequencies get set up in our cells deeper than that. I mean, in these quantum vibrational, that 99% empty space, the vibrational frequencies and energetics at play are impacted by our thoughts and our emotions and our heart beliefs, not just intellectually. I mean, intellectually, she could have even said, I forgive that, my daughter. But if it's still in her heart, the heart's programming, I think with every beat, programming your cells. And traditional Chinese medicine has even said certain organs kind of hold the memories and the emotions of certain emotions. Anger is in the liver or something. I don't have all that memorized, but different organs hold different emotions is what they kind of believe. So anyways, he said, kill alligators all day long. If you don't drain the swamp, you got to bring truth to that. The truth. Now this gets more into personal kind of area people have to just explore on their own. How I would see this is the God that created everything. He is the truth. And he created all this physical realm. He put physical laws in place. And we all understand that. If I jump off a 10-story building, physical laws come into play that take me to the ground, and I'm probably going to get hurt, my physical body, and maybe it won't work anymore, meaning it's dead. I can't die because I'm a spirit. I'm moving on to the next place. But the physical has to operate by these laws. If I go outside my building here into the alley and there's a down power line, law of electricity, if I go grab that down power line, get electrocuted. Probably my physical cells aren't going to operate anymore. Someone holds me underneath water for 10 minutes. God did not make my physical body to take oxygen out of that water like a fish can. So, I mean, there's the physical laws that we know about. Totally get that. But then there's spiritual laws in place. The God that created everything didn't just make physical molecules that interact physically. There's this supernatural component, this quantum, whatever you want to call it. There's this interplay and a connection. And then he gives us this book and he tells us all about it. And all through there, it talks about it. Guard your heart, for out of it flow all issues of life. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. A merry heart doeth good like medicine. It's all through there. But the problem is we have these two areas, our spirit and our soul. The spirit is where we can hear truth from our creator. He is the truth and he can download that truth to our spirit man. But then in our soul, that's where our mind, our will, our emotions, all this memory, my mom did this to me, my spouse did this to me, my boss did this to me, and the world, I mean, politics, all this stuff, our own intellect, our own rational thinking, prove it to me. Just that whole part, that's our soul. And that's where the temptation is to judge truth by our five senses. And that ancient book says, don't do that. It leads to death. The mind set on the flesh, the carnal, the five senses, you use five senses to judge truth, it leads to death. The mind set on the spirit, which is the truth, leads to life. And that's the interplay we can actually co-create with God here in the physical realm based off our thoughts and our spoken word. Power, life, and death is in the tongue. This isn't name it and claim it. It's the truth, though. What you believe in your heart, so are you, is true. So you can bring the reality of the culture, the kingdom of heaven, which is love and truth, and God that created all this. You can bring that culture into the physical realm through your thought and your spoken word, and you can change the physical. You can bring the truth and change physical particles, change your environment, change your terrain, absolutely 100% co-create with God. And he set it up that way. And he told us about it. And this one of the biggest deceptions is God's in control of everything. And what's going to happen is just going to happen. I have no control over it. That's like your genes are in control. That's not the truth. God set this up and told Adam, take dominion and rule. And that means you're the boss of the birds of the air, the fish in the sea, the beasts in the field. You name the animals. That means God can't name them because he told Adam to do that. And he's not going to go back on his word and cancel his word because he's not a liar and he can't be a liar. And he's not the oppressor. He's the deliverer. And if God comes in and changes the free will choice of a man, then that's oppressing that man's free will. And that's an oppressor. And he's not. So he put us in the earth. We have authority. We're going to say and do stuff and there's going to be fruit. There's the law of the seed, sowing and reaping. We don't understand these things. We weren't taught the gospel of the kingdom. We're taught the gospel of salvation. Get to heaven, get to heaven, get to heaven. No, the kingdom's now, and it's inside of us. And we need to understand these spiritual laws of the kingdom so we can bring that into the earth. And I would say every evil, bad thing that's ever happened was because of free will choice of a man or woman, mankind, humans, under the influence of the liar who comes to steal and kill and destroy. And Jesus came to give life, and the adversary came to bring death. And that's it. Now he's defeated and powerless, but in our thinking, so how this plays out in the real world, I was listening in my soul because I believed I was rejected when I was 6 years old. That's another story. And so if I believe that, that drives an emotion called, I want to be loved and accepted because I'm rejected. So now my antennas are really up for love and acceptance. And I notice if I follow all the rules and keep my teachers happy and my parents happy, my coaches happy, my Sunday school teachers happy, they like me, they give me physical, body language and verbal, that they like me. And so the spirit of man pleasing whispers a lie to me and my soul, and I believe it. I got to keep everybody happy for them to like me. And then performance kicks in. When I make all A's, I get accolades. When I make first place in sports, I get accolades. When I make first place in arts, craft, and science fair and blah, blah, blah. So you got to perform to be loved and accepted. So those are all lies in my soul from the adversary. You're rejected, and therefore man pleasing and performance is the only thing that's going to soothe that emotion. And we just spend our whole life with these filters on our heart, and everything we see through our five senses comes through those filters. And I judge everything that way. And I make decisions and speak and act and run my whole company under the influence of these. That's lordship. I didn't even know lordship. And those were lords of my life. man
A lot
pleasing,
of work.
strive and sweat and other your brow and
Bondage.
bondage. So there's so much here, totally interplays. You can't separate this out. And medical school does it doesn't even recognize any of this stuff hardly, but then it separates the body. If you
Mm-hmm.
have a headache, you see the neurologist. You have a tummy ache, you go see the gastroenterologist. You have joint aches, you see the orthopedic. You have whatever. We'd separate everything into subspecialties. There's like 100 of them now. So we are so far off in standard American medical education and healthcare, which is sick care system. It's just really almost unbelievable. But people submit to that thing because they think, and their doctor can be super sweet, super nice, can love people, love Jesus, love God, but they can't see. So, I mean, that's a lot for people to have to work through. But I encourage people to do it because otherwise you're standard Americans. So what we teach is try to teach people to not be a standard American. And if all you did was stand up out of your chair every hour, set your alarm on your phone, sitting's a new smoking. So many studies about how being seated 90 degrees all day long for 8 hours, how damaging that is for lots of reasons we don't have time to go into. But if you just did that, stood up every hour literally for 5 seconds and sat back down, yeah, it'd be better to do a squat and a wall push up or walk to the water cooler and back, or even outside and get some sunshine for 2 minutes. That'd be even better. But that's one step off the standard American. You're not a standard American as much. Don't let diet, exercise, and all this holistic stuff in the natural realm move or elevate up to a position of Lord or God and your Savior. And that's your sole focus. And that's I got to do everything perfect and just right. And if I do, then my body will respond perfectly and all this stuff. And we get almost just so focused on that. And so there's a fine line. And I like to talk about stewardship versus made whole. Made whole, that's more your heart, that's your thinking, your heart. And that's the ultimate, I think, is being made whole. That's the 10 lepers. Jesus said, "You're cleansed. Go show the rabbi, and you're clean now." And the one comes back, and Jesus looked at him and said, "You're made whole." Sozo is the Greek word, and you go look that up. This wholeness, and it has to do with our heart even being made whole in our thinking. So we've got to line our thinking up with truth, and the Spirit brings us that truth. And we got to get our soul to submit to the truth. So I had to recognize these other influences in my thinking were not the truth. And I had to let the truth speak to my heart, not my intellect. God even said, and David said, "I want to build you a house in the earth for you to live in." And God said, "No, don't do that. Don't build a temple. I don't want a temple. I told you to build a tabernacle. Tabernacle's mobile. I want to move with my people. My presence needs to move with them. Don't do this thing." He told David no. And David kind of insisted and ended up building it. But God said, "I'm going to build a temple, all right, but one of your descendants will. And it's going to be a spiritual house of living stones, and I will write my law on their heart, not on these stone tablets." And that's Holy Spirit coming in and showing you the truth in your heart of God's character and nature. There's something about God that we don't fully trust or believe. And then therefore we got to look somewhere else for it. If I don't fully receive my love and acceptance and self-value and worth from him, then I'm going to go look to be first place in everything and have people praise me to get my feel of acceptance and love.
Absolutely. It's very real. And I want to talk about some things that we can do to help for those that are just like light bulbs starting to come on, like, where do I go with this now? And I want to talk about a couple of things that I have done personally, and then I want you to share. So first of all, I don't watch TV, and I'm not against TV, but the majority is kind of taking us in a different direction. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to bring things into my life that are supporting my beliefs and what I am all about and all of the goals that I have. Think about something like a sitcom that people sit down and they laugh
Yeah.
and they're tearing down manhood. So then our children are being exposed to this, but like on a continual basis. Even
Yep.
back as with Flintstones, we laugh at that and we kind of think of it lightly, but if you really look at that, like the men are stupid. And
Yeah.
so anyway, it's just in the wrong direction. And when we are focusing constantly on this, but also more sitting. So it's called a channel for a reason, and it's being
Mhm.
channeled into the wrong direction and negative. A
Yeah.
lot of negativity. That's just
Yeah.
something that I did personally. If that's their way of relaxing for an hour or two, that's fine. It's just not mine. I'd rather listen to a podcast or something that is going to help me grow
Yeah.
as a person. Another thing that I have been doing is not allowing the schedule to rule me. I'm ruling the schedule. And so as we talk about these things that we need to do, like getting out in the sunshine first thing in the morning, drinking our coffee outside so that we can start that rhythm flowing properly, or spending time in God's word, because we get so busy that that becomes the last thing instead of the first thing, that that's really what's going to teach us all of the things that you just were telling us about. Then we've got to manage our schedule instead of letting our schedule manage us. That's something that I have been doing, just being super intentional with plugging that in. And I still have old school pen and paper schedule. And so I just make sure that I write things down to make sure that they happen, and definitely concentrating on what we put in affects us 100%. So, what are we listening to? Even as simple as the music, is that music taking us in the right direction? What are the words saying? Like all of these things that people just don't even think about, that just live life and just go with the flow, and they're just doing their thing. And, and I don't know why I'm going to bring this up, but I am. So, even songs that I listened to and loved as a child, and, in adulthood, I'm like singing the song and I'm just like, oh my word. I can't believe what that song was saying. Didn't even have a clue. Anyway, just like paying attention to all the things going on in your life. Who are you talking to? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Are they people that are leading you in the right direction, or are they constantly causing chaos? And I'm not one of those that say kick out the toxic people. I think we need to be witnessing to the toxic people. We need to be witnessing to those people that need to hear what we are teaching, but surrounding yourself with people that are going to lift you up and they're going to help you think right. That's one of the reasons why I wanted you on this podcast, because it's not a podcast on my YouTube channel, because people can go and listen to your things and join Veritas Wellness, and they can start hearing the things that are going to help them to think right. And those are just some of the things that I am doing. I'm doing many things, but I want you to share with us some of the tangible things that you're doing, that you are teaching some people to do.
Well, I agree with everything you said on the tell a vision and channeling and programming and all that. Absolutely. I mean, in the world, but not of the world. This in the world, we don't realize how that statement and just how we get sucked into the world, constant bombardment. Your eyes and ears are constantly being exposed to the world, who's after typically one thing: money, money, money. And they'll do whatever they have to do to get it, including getting you addicted to food, addicted to screens, addicted to all kinds of stuff. But it's through these five senses. So just understanding this is a deeper battle at play. The world's after you and your eye, really your seer, your think, these filters, it wants them. And it's not for a good reason, good purpose. So just number one, recognizing that. So I love to fast. People think fasting, they think food or drink, maybe fast from. That's fine. There's benefits, but fast from phones
I'm
or
so glad you
social
brought that up.
media, or you turn on the TV permanently. It sounds like fasting from that. But even if you can't permanently, and probably we can't put this phone away permanently, it's so intertwined with our daily life. But you can fast from it. You don't have to first thing in the morning go straight to it. Let's set some kind of rhythm and routine. And even if that means a timer, sounds like a childish thing. You get 10 minutes on the iPad or whatever. When you go on your walk, your 10-minute, go get some sunshine in the middle of the day on a lunch break or whatever, leave your phone. I mean, it's great to have it, listen to a podcast and all that, but we need to schedule in some times where we don't. So think about that. Fasting from phones, fasting from social media, fasting from TV. but just fasting from standard American life. Think about your ancestors, great grandparents. What were they doing in the evenings? What were they doing on the weekends? So another practical thing I like to teach my people, and this is for, again, lots of reasons, but try to get exposed to different kinds of nature if you're able to. I know some people are limited, but if you can get out to a forest, to a beach, to a desert, to a petting zoo, a barnyard, a garden, a park, I mean, these different environments, and they've actually done studies on this. Green space, blue space, so oceans, rivers, lakes, stuff, birds chirping, nature, really. The microbiome, you can go just for that reason. There's different bacteria in these different environments, and we need these bacteria on our skin, in our nose, in our sinuses, in our GI tract. These microbes do so much for our body, for our physical defenses, for our pharmacy. We can make natural antibiotics. We can make vitamin C, B vitamins, all sorts of different things, but our gut, it's our gut bacteria making them. Human physiology can't make vitamin C, but your gut bugs can. So just getting in these different environments, it's multifactorial, the benefit. It drops cortisol. When you're outside in midday with intense sunshine, that increases melatonin at night. So you can sleep better, get a deeper sleep. So many good reasons to get into nature. And if you can mix it up and get variety, that's even better. The 30-30-30 rules are real practical, and that goes to sunshine. You mentioned drink your coffee in the morning outside. There's benefits to having first morning sunrise light coming through your optic nerve to your brain. It sets certain circadian rhythms and metabolism effects, immune system effects. Midday sun, and then within 30 minutes of sunset. So that's the 30-30-30. Within 30 minutes of sunrise, within 30 minutes of sunset, and try to get exposure outside. And then try to get 30 minutes in the midday sun. So if you can put the phone down, get outside, get some sun, get in nature, these are basic things, but very powerful on your physiology. Real practical, even when you're outside, and not on your phone, just talking to God. But do it in a manner, don't be asking him for stuff necessarily. Like we tend to kind of run through our list of things. Try to get in tune with your heart and what you're really believing in your heart, but say it out loud. My God, I'm mad at you because I think you should have done this, or you didn't show up here, or how'd you let this happen, or whatever. Even if intellectually, well, God didn't really let that happen because I have free will. But in your heart, if you're harboring that still against God, then you need to confess that. But when you're outside in nature in the sun and you're just turned off the phone and you're just walking, it's a good time to do that. So I love confession, honest confession. I mean, you can ask questions, but not like, just requests like Santa Claus list. I like to ask questions like, what do you want me to know about fill in the blank? If there's a reoccurring theme in your life, this thing just keeps flaring up on you between you and your boss or you and your sibling or whatever, start talking to God about that. What do you want me to know about that? And of course, being in the word is big. But I mean, you don't have to read you can read one line, but ask the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth, show me the truth in this. And it'll be some one-liner that you might have read it 100 times before. You might have heard preachers preaching on it before, but it'll hit you in a way that'll be like an aha these personal light bulbs you keep mentioning, but these personal aha moments in our heart, that's Holy Spirit showing you something in your heart. Mm-hmm. But you got to have the space to do it. And that's where turning off the TV, watching what you're doing, who you're listening to, fasting from the phone, that kind of thing. We need space. I love journaling too. Just get out and start writing. And it doesn't matter, just whatever, it'll start flowing. You'll get in the flow and just write. And then you go back and read that and like, oh, there's stuff there. And the Holy Spirit will show you something in that. So these are real simple, but totally doable. Don't cost a dime. You just need to start implementing them. And don't just get swept along with the world of just sitting on this thing all night long for 2 straight hours and then getting up tomorrow and doing it all over again. The first light you see is blue light from a screen. That does not do good to your brain.
You have to be extremely intentional because this is the matrix and it is designed to hook you up to it. Everything is on it. Everything. Yep. Your bank account, your alarm, everything. So we have got to intentionally do the things to get out of that.
Yeah. We've
Make
got to rule over that and don't let that rule over us. That's the whole lordship thing. So, I mean, we're in the world, we're in the world for a purpose, but not being of it. So we can interact with it, utilize it, but it's not lording over us, and we can set it down. And that's why it's good to practice this setting it down routinely,
yes.
fasting. Anything that lords over you, we need to really consider fasting from, which obviously can be sugar and processed food and different things, food in general,
Mhm.
coffee, but phones.
Yeah, well, it takes self-discipline, and that
Mm-hmm.
in itself is a practice all on its own. Well, I want to thank you for your time. And I know that this was a lot, but it is all so important. And if you just need to take it bits at a time and kind of let it settle and then come back and listen to some more, there's so much amazing information. And as those light bulbs start coming on, you're going to want to get a lot of this in your life and start kind of heading in this direction, which is truly what brings the fruits of the Spirit, the love, the joy, the peace. And peace is really what we all are after. When someone comes to me and they fill out their balance wheel, the majority of them, joy is at the bottom. Well, joy is 100% linked up to our relationship with Christ. So as we are building and growing that relationship, the joy naturally comes. And so do a lot of these other things with just the Holy Spirit leading us and guiding us through all of the things that we have been talking about. But guys, this is the good life. This is the joy, and this is the optimal health and the missing component for so many people. So that's why I wanted Dr. Ben Edwards to come on here and share, because nobody says it any better than him. And just kind of diving deep, we need to. So a lot of times for me, like education, information is empowering. So hopefully that has been your experience. I want you to comment, leave us some comments below, kind of let us know where you are in your journey and maybe some ideas that you would like to share. I want my platform to be a place of sharing where people can go and read comments and learn from those as well. Thank you so much for being here. If you have not subscribed, if you would be so kind to hit the subscribe button and give a little like, share this information with people you know need to hear it. And you guys have a great day. Again, Ben, I want to thank you so much for being here and spending this time with us today.
You're welcome, Kimberly. Thanks again for having me.